technically we are now in spring, although it's coming on slow. And I realized in the fall I documented in a few videos a design concept that I had for a way to manage our chicken composting operation through the winter, kind of taking feedback from the first few years of doing this work. And now that we're supposed to get up into the 40s and 50s, it's going to start to thaw out. I wanted to go through and review what worked and what didn't in this system for those of you that have interest in replicating parts or not. So let's talk about that. What I don't want to do in this video is spend a tremendous amount of time talking about the whole design system. I'm going to link right here to the first video that I made in later October where I go into greater detail. Very brief overview is that the concept was to have two basically very large, long compost rings that flank a hot composting operation through the middle, using gravity to feed and tumble the compost through. On the surface and in a very basic way, I'm pleased enough with it, but very clear feedback that I got from this system. Next fall, I will not use this ring system again. My plan is to invest in a truckload or two of hay bales, and the reason I like these better is, first of all, they're movable units, so I can change the layout and structure of this composting system during the winter based on the amount of compost that's happening. This is a little static for me. And the other thing I found is that the 4-foot-high welded wire fencing as a compost ring, this long, actually I'm going to walk over and show. This started happening in around January. It's not the end of the world, but unless I were to put in some very serious posts, the weight of the compost and the freezing and thawing really flex this material, and eventually this would fall apart. So it kind of defeats the purpose of having this composting area. You can see that the reason for it was so that I had a destination for putting unwanted compost elements. So twigs and branches, pineapple tops, onions, any citrus peels or coffee grinds. You're very interested in that. We'll see you around. And that's all well and good. Another bit of feedback that I would have for this system going into it for next year, I would like to be a little bit more picky about the compost sources that I take. I think we've already honed in a little bit more on more organic food scraps, higher quality. We pick through for our own compost, and we're kind of a little selective. Some of the health questions or concerns that we had, I wonder if they have something to do with the fact that the chickens were eating more coffee grinds, or they had access to something that they shouldn't have had in the compost. So moving forward, I think we're going to look more for leafy greens and nice quality meat scraps, nice quality whole wheat breads if we're going to take compost from elsewhere. By and large, following what the chickens are showing us with their desire, first of all, soybeans were done. If we soak and ferment them, they don't seem to like them. If we soak, ferment, cook them thoroughly, they don't really go for them. If we roast them, they don't really go for them. So we have a soybean. Sasha can make some tofu with it.
Miso.
Miso, yeah, right. There's lots of uses for us, but by and large, the chickens really don't go for it. What we're finding by a landslide, the two feedstocks that the chickens, I would consider like core feed for them every day that I want to make sure we continue on with, is mixing nice ratios of whole grain that's ready, viable to sprout, soaking it in quality water inside and sprouting it. And then the trick that we're finding has worked really nicely this winter is every day pouring some of that sprouted grain out on top of the compost pile in a container. They love the juice that comes from it. They eat it for a day or two, and then once it goes stale or a little bit funky, I can simply tap it out onto the compost. And mixing, we talk about this in a lot of the videos, but getting in a rhythm of mixing lots and lots of the whole grains in with wood chips and charcoal at the early stage so that they have free access to warm sprouts the entire winter seems just about as high, like top tier, as we can get as far as feed for them. They've been eating all morning. They're not going to be super psyched if I open up the pile. But by adding those grains in overabundance, so basically like a 5-gallon bucket, shush in there, 5-gallon bucket filled with a mix of grains, adding into the wood chips early on and folding it in. Every time I turn the compost, let's see, I just turned it this morning and found one particularly huge pocket. They've been working on it, but especially the red winter wheat, it germinates very rapidly, even when it's colder. And it really incentivizes the chickens working these piles apart. So if I pile up and get a really nice steep pile and there's sprouts all buried within, they'll really work it. So the other thing I noticed with this system for this winter, the way I designed it, and this is part of the reason why I want to move over to using hay bales, this static design, it ended up being too tight in here. So in fact, let me pause for a second and go down and show you. The bottom end of this system, where the compost is supposed to focus on its way through, it just gets too throttled in here. And my ability to get in and move with the hay fork, with the chickens, turning compost, it's a little too tight. So again, the static rings I'm going to phase out. A big stack of hay bales that can be lined out and then adjusted according to the volume of material throughout the winter, or stacked up like bricks to make taller composting areas. I think that's our future moving forward with this. But overall, I've been very pleased. We've gotten at least 20 yards, maybe more, of compost. Still needs to finish. This is the aging stuff. This is about 2 weeks worth of compost from the system. And you can see it's frozen in a few places, but overall, last little bits of trash. Overall, really nice color, uniform, beautiful smell. And I think overall it's been a system that I'm very pleased with. And that's our little mini update for now on our chicken composting system. As we transition back into spring, I look forward to experimenting with ways of providing more fresh pasture and greens for them in the yard, and we'll share that as we go. Thanks. Cool.